everybody. How you doing? Coming to you here from Austin city limits for Data Center Live, which is pretty exciting. I am fortunate to be sitting here with Chris Gorthy, and you're with DPR. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. My current role at DPR is the Advanced Tech Core Market Preconstruction Leader. So essentially responsible for all pre-construction activities across our entire portfolio. Work super closely with our business units and regions, but trying to provide consistency to all of our customers nationwide in the mission critical space.
Very cool. Very cool. I got to tell you, I have a long past with DPR. I've been fortunate enough to work with you guys a bunch, and I'd imagine with the sheer volume you guys do, you stay a pretty busy man.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started at DPR, we were sub $1 billion construction company.
Yeah.
And now we're approaching a $10 billion construction company in just 20 years.
It's great.
The growth's been incredible. A lot of that growth has been driven by a mission critical data center environment,
Sure.
right? Somewhere between 25 to 30% of our revenues is in the mission critical space. So it's a huge portion of our revenues.
Sure. And with obviously with your role and what you do, I know supply chain and labor logistics and things like that are a big part of what you do. I'm curious from your perspective, are we starting to see a little bit of a relief from some of the COVID days and what we saw from a supply chain perspective, and how's that affecting you guys? Where do you see that at today?
I think it's a great question. One I get all the time from all of our customers. And sometimes customers just assume, okay, we saw a huge spike. We should see that same reverse trend.
Right.
The reality is we never see that full reverse trend
Right.
as much as we saw the upside, right? But there are things stabilizing. One of the craziest scenarios I saw through all of COVID was with metal joists and decking.
Yeah.
So I've been a pre-construction estimator for 25 years, and joist costs range from $1,000 to $1,600 a ton, literally for 15 to 18 years.
Right.
And from 2020 to 2023, they were over $6,000 a ton. Like the increase was so dramatic,
Right.
And we saw it, right? We saw
100%.
customers change their designs to get away from joists and decking to structural shapes, increase the tonnage in their building because it was cheaper to put in wide flange tubing and things like that as opposed to joists. And so that's where, we got paid to say, hey, run this analysis for me. What happens if I add a bunch of steel, increase footing sizes,
Yeah.
but change the overall structure of the building, right?
Right.
Those things have backed off,
Right.
right? Joists and decking were a lead time of 42 weeks. They've come back 20, 22 weeks, even sub like 16 or 18 weeks. Those things are providing relief in the market. It's great to see. We all know of the OFCI, equipment challenges we still see with long lead times.
Sure.
Again, it's better than it was, but it is still a primary driver in our schedules with most of our customers. Labor will continue to get worse, right? And we saw a large portion of workforce, right? We have an aging craft workforce across the U.S. A lot of those aging workforce retired through COVID, right? And haven't come back. And in general, we are not replacing the craft we are losing. I heard you just talking about it on the stage, right?
Yeah.
Just now. Some really great discussions around diversity. How do we get people to take maybe non-conventional paths after high school into the trades? It will continue to be a huge supply challenge for us as labor.
Definitely. I mean, I agree. And that's, that's a challenge that we all deal with every day. It happens to be what I do for a profession, is trying to help, other teams address these labor shortages. And it's, it's really interesting because I, personally came from a situation where I didn't even know what a data center was, and I think, unfortunately, if you went into 99.9% of high schools across the nation and you said, hey, do you know what a data center is? I hate to say it, but I think you're going to get a very similar answer, which is, I have no idea. Like, somebody said it today and it was a great point. Like, data centers are just that thing in the background that everybody needs, but nobody knows about,
Yeah.
right? And so it's how do we shift that? How do we get out and change that knowledge base? And I know, DPR specifically, I know you guys do a ton of, community outreach things and you guys really get involved with the communities that you guys have programs going on, which is everywhere, right?
Mhm.
So, how is DPR addressing those labor shortages? And aside from just everybody goes to the colleges and tries to pick this person, that person, what are you guys seeing that you guys are really trying to go after to help with the shortage?
Well, I think there's a couple components about it. When we talk about primary locations, places like Ashburn, Phoenix, Chicago, those places have a decent craft pool. And
Sure.
there are still challenges there. What makes it worse is when we're in the secondary markets or remote markets,
Right.
right? Those locations really struggle
Right.
because the craft availability, the people just aren't there.
Right.
Now you have to pay people to travel, relocate, per diems. I think to your point about going into high school, it's like we could be telling people, hey, you've got a six-figure salary if you're willing to travel for a little bit, go see the country, go
Yep.
see different parts of the world, make a good living. Like that would be an incredible story that we don't tell enough,
I
right?
I agree completely, and I think it's critical to do it at that point in life, right? Like I did it at a point in my life that really wasn't ideal, right? I just came out of the military. I had 2 kids, and I would travel for 30 days, go home for 3, travel for 30. I did that for 2.5 years,
Yeah.
right? And to be able to take a kid coming out of high school and say, "Hey, you're gonna go put your time in the trenches of some of these programs," but at at that age, it's the ideal time to, like you said, go
Go
see the
explore.
world, go travel around, go meet different people, do different things, right? So I think it's critical that we go that route somehow. I
Yeah.
just don't know how we do it.
I think for us, the second piece, the benefit of the organization I work for is we've got a variety of self-perform activities. We perform a lot of our own trades.
Right,
Concrete, drywall. We now have an entity EIG that's doing electrical work, right? So we recognize the craft availability workforce challenge is real. So of course we're doing workforce development programs, but it is about communicating to people and their network of family and friends like, hey, this is a great world to work in,
right,
right? It's the market isn't going anywhere. It's
right.
only expanding. It is labor certainty when many other markets don't have that labor certainty. And I think that's what we're trying to promote to people. We create opportunities for folks. Let's say, if they're not in one of our main office hub locations and they want to move or their family is in a location that's remote, finding ways to say, hey, you can go do that, but become a traveler,
Right.
right? Work for us in these other locations. But it takes, there's no silver bullet.
Right.
It is going to take a variety of programs, a variety of opportunities. I think you were on stage a moment ago talking about like the GI Bill,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
And it's like, what would that be like if we went to high school students and said, hey, here's health coverage, here's a guaranteed bonus, here's post college education if you go do a stint in the trades,
Yep.
right? Very similar situation to the what the military has done for many, many decades. I think it's going to be creative solutions like that that help us through these challenges.
No, definitely. I agree completely. And it's also, I think that we forget a lot of times too, that's exactly what was available and what was told 75 years ago.
Mm.
Right. Right. Post World War II. The country was in a construction boom, right? We were building skyscrapers and bridges and dams. And, that's how everyone was able to have a job and come home and be able to make a living and quote unquote, live, the American dream at the time and stuff. And I think that we got away from that for so long, people saying, hey, go get a college education, go do this, go do that, instead of saying, hey, just like you said, here's benefits. here's pay here. Oh, hey, by the way, we also have programs to help with continuing education. So come work and get your education while you're working, right? So I think it's definitely interesting. And you know let's go back to equipment and materials and things like that for a little bit, because you said something that I thought was funny, because not funny, but it's true, right? Like, we saw those massive increases during COVID, and what's funny is a lot of people forget, what, 4 years before that, when we had all the steel tariffs and everything like that, people were freaking out, like, man, it could never get worse than
Yeah.
this. And then 4 years later it was worse, right? And we had to deal with that. But uh a group like yours, who I know does, multiple different facets around the country of construction, right? Do you guys use like any type of in-house, let's call it quote unquote supply chain management, where, you know, a lot, let's face it, a lot of these programs have very similar equipment, very, similar requirements, how do you guys juggle, hey, I have this client over here that has been waiting on this gear for X amount of time, but I've got this other client that I bought the same piece of equipment for, and we're late there, right? Like, what I mean, like robbing Peter to pay Paul type deal, and
Yeah.
and managing a supply chain like that.
I think it's a great question. I actually think it's part of the solution moving forward. As we talk about scale, the wave that's coming,
Yeah.
right? I think we have to be more collaborative, not only within our own companies, but with other competition.
Right.
In the meta program I happen to be participating in, we use the word co-opetition all the time.
Yeah.
Right? There are 7 general contractors working in the meta program right now in the US. And it's like those have created opportunities to talk and share and communicate. I think to address this coming wave, those are the kinds of things we're going to need to do.
Right.
But it's not easy. And although we say, oh, it's very similar, it's also very different.
Yeah.
Even simple things like Unistrut specifications. There could be 12 different minor changes in a Unistrut specification that makes it dramatically different from one customer to the next.
Right.
Could be the finish, could be the weight it's going to bear, right? All of those things have an impact. And so it doesn't create a great, easy opportunity to go, hey, we're going to just go buy 10 million linear feet of strut and stockpile it. And when the customer needs it, we have it.
Right.
Because all of a sudden those subtle changes make whatever we just bought obsolete.
Right.
But I think that's where we need to go. That's where I think the flexibility, if we can streamline and align as an industry on certain components and elements, it'll help us all. It'll reduce the stress on the supply chain for everyone.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it definitely would. And it's an interesting concept and topic, because we're coming through a phase in the data center industry right now where, end users were making decisions on who they were going to based on what equipment you could or couldn't get, right? And what your lead times were, and what your plan was for your VMI strategy, supply chain. And one thing that's interesting now is, like, as we are, like you mentioned, starting to come out of that, we're seeing lead times, start to trail back to normal, and or not normal, but better than what
Yeah.
they've been, right? They'll never be back to normal. But what I see coming next is the question's going to shift to, do you have the labor?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the individuals, and not just, you've been in this industry 20 plus years, right? And so better than anybody, too, our industry hasn't been the best at change, and our industry hasn't been the best at willing to take quote unquote risks, right? And because of that, we always wanted, the most senior individual, the person that knew the most, and X, Y, or Z. And I would have to imagine at a company as big as your guys, the balance is, uh a deal on stage was saying it best, right? You have an 80-20 balance, right? Well, how do I put the 80% of my people that need a little bit more, how do I pair them up with the 20 to be able to balance that more, right? And how are you guys going about, training these new individuals coming into the space and getting them ready? Because I do think it'll come down to that's, how deals will be won and lost
Yeah.
is the team you have and your ability to put boots on the ground.
So I think there's two things there I want to address, Jesse. One is that labor is going to benefit and has to benefit from enhanced prefabrication strategies.
Sure.
And people say, I hear it all the time, oh, we prefab all kinds of stuff. It's like, yeah, what are you really prefabricating? Like, talk to me about that. We've got to get to a solution where multidiscipline prefabrication,
Yeah.
right, in a warehouse that again can be consistent from customer to customer, product to product, that isn't a one-off every time.
Yeah.
But we have to, as an industry, find a way to do multidiscipline prefabrication. That's going to help with some of those opportunities with our workforce challenges. Now, on the flip side, lots of the people that are coming into the industry, the younger folks, those are the things they're excited about.
100%.
Hey, let me go model. Let me go fabricate. Let me, get into robotics, right? We've got to find a way to maximize and leverage those experiences because we can't build like we have for the last 100 years. Right. We just can't.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it's a great time for that change and for that shift. I said something earlier today, and it wasn't until somebody said something that really made me think about it. Like at my age and where I'm at, I was really the last generation that was the first to use a cell phone and the last to drink from a garden hose, right?
Love that. Yeah.
But where we're at today is the labor that is coming in today and the generation that is coming into the workforce, they've never known anything different than what we have today. And from a technology standpoint and the ability to communicate and collaborate and work together. And I truly believe that we're going to see some industry changing things come from these individuals coming in the space simply because they've always been the group that's been able to be like, well, why can't I do that?
Yeah.
I mean, tell me why I can't.
So I have a 14-year-old son.
Yeah.
He's incredibly smarter than I was at 14.
Yeah.
Right. Their experiences, their knowledge, what they see on a day-to-day basis is way more than we ever did at that
Sure.
age. Right. And it is finding the ways to creatively educate, teach, communicate the things that have worked in our industry and the things that haven't worked. And I think like as we've scaled as an organization, we've determined like, hey, we've got to have a more concentrated effort on training for people in a variety of ways.
Yep.
Right. Training when I came back into the industry in 1999, that's why I've got the salt and pepper hair. It was like sitting in a training room for days, hours of learning. And now it's got to be short 3-minute clips.
Yep.
But you know what? The people can pick it up and absorb the same thing in 3 minutes that took me 4 hours to learn.
Yep.
And I think we have to progressively, again, align our industry around a shifting culture, a shifting workforce that thinks differently than we do.
Yep.
And I think that is the generation of the workforce that is going to help tackle some of these challenges because they can think differently.
Definitely.
They're not so confined in a box like maybe we were as we came into the industry.
Nope. I agree completely. And I know it Precon obviously falls under you as well. And it's one of those things where I'm fortunate that I've got to be in the trades in the field. I've got to be a general contractor and I've got to work on the owner side, right? And I think it's always funny, there's a term that's thrown around a lot, free con. I mean, everybody wants a little bit of free con in these things, but I truly believe that, in order for us to be able to find creative solutions and ways for us to tackle, some of the issues that we're seeing, whether it be from a distribution standpoint or even, like you said, it changes down to, the little different notes and bubbles around Unistrut, right? Like there's so many different areas that we have to get into. And I was curious from your perspective. I know, 10 years ago, owners didn't even want to have that conversation, right? They did not want to really talk about what they needed to change,
Yeah.
right? And the things they needed to do. Now, I think that conversation's becoming a lot more open as we're facing some of the issues that we are. But I was curious, what your feelings are around, how do we get everybody to the table? How do we do what you were talking about a minute ago?
Yeah.
How do we get to a point to where it's like, hey, we know we need this, and we can all still have our cool onesie twosies of this is what makes us great. But how do we, for the most part, standardize on 85%?
Yeah. Again, I think there's lots of great points in there, Jesse. I think for me, the conversation around free con, it's never really free,
Sure.
right? You're paying for it somehow.
Yep.
You're either paying for it directly or some hidden other way,
Yep.
right? But I would say our industry has done itself a disservice at times. It's like what our customers need today is for us to push back on them, is to challenge them. It's to think about, people are always like, hey, Chris, I need it as cheap as possible. It's like, well, what are you asking? Do you need it as cheap as possible, first phase deployment?
Right.
Do you need it as cheap as possible, full deployment, full, built out, fit out, greenfield shell? What is the metric you're trying to achieve? With and without redundancy, people play games with numbers all the time. It's like, what do you really want to get to? Tell me that, and then let me help strategize options with your design team, right? Let's make sure the building is as efficient as possible. Every single square foot is maximized for the data center or compute space versus wasted space and circulation and mechanical electrical rooms. Pay me to go analyze those things for you, right? Because I promise our team's cost on the front end for a couple hundred hours to do true analytical studies for you is going to save you millions on the back end in a lease deal. Those are the kinds of things we need to get to, and not let's all go cut each other and say, hey, I can do pre-construction for free, but actually not spend the time and energy for you to analyze those things.
Exactly. And one thing I used to always tell people, and it's funny because you can literally say this regardless of where you sit at the table, right? Whether you're the contractor, the general contractor, the owner, or the end user, right? There's three things that everybody wants, right? They want it fast, they want it safe, and they want it cheap.
Yeah.
The thing is though, you can't have all three of those, right? If you want it safe and you want it fast, it's not going to be cheap, right? Nobody's ever going to, at least I hope nobody in our industry will ever, sacrifice safety, right? Because safety is, and I know DPR is huge on that. And I know you guys, make no qualms about not cutting corners there. And so, but what has always killed me is it's those three things, and we all want it. We all just maybe want something different of it because of the seat that we sit in. But it's how do you get people to understand that, you want all three of those? It's collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you get it. It's not saying, well, you have 16 weeks to get this done and I don't care what you got to do, blah, 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 right? It's like, well, it would have been a lot easier to get this done in 16 weeks if we would have been talking about it 8 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of just coming and saying, hey, this is what I want. Right. So it's interesting because I think that it's trust is really what it is. And we have to get to that point to where we're all sitting at the same table and having the same conversation.
Agreed. I think collaboration's key. I think there's a term so our safety program, right? Injury-free environments, that idea, every person goes home to their family in the same condition or better than they came to the job site every day.
Yep.
And that's hard. It's hard to maintain, right? At scale. But it doesn't, we just simply won't accept that injuries will happen.
Sure.
None of us can accept that. But I think what you're also getting to is this total cost equation.
Yeah.
When people analyze those things and say, I want schedule, I want cost, I want safety, it's like, are you really looking at the total cost? Meaning, hey, I want you to cut corners. Yeah, maybe it creates some safety challenges. But on the back end, if you have an injury or an incident and you have an insurance claim, like, what is the cost of that?
A lot.
That's not
Yeah,
factored into the
it's not.
upfront cost of the construction program.
It's not at
And
all.
so that is where it takes balance. We like to use the power of and. It's
Yeah,
like, hey, how do we do all of these things? But it's by looking at the total cost,
it is.
right? At the end of the day, what would be the most terrible solution that injury could cost you, your company, your trade partners, everyone that's involved in that project, let alone the mental anxiety and challenges it creates to the rest of your staff and how that there's just so many scenarios there. And so for us, it's like, hey, let's have this total cost discussion,
Yeah.
right? Um, and let's talk about the end state, not day one cost,
Right.
because that's where we can provide the most value. That's where we can be the most collaborative,
Right.
in that space.
Are you finding that your clients are becoming more and more open to those conversations?
I'd say you got a mix of clients.
Yeah.
You have clients that are absolutely willing to engage early, often. How can we be strategic? We actually had a really great meeting last week here in Austin with some great customers, some design partner engineers to talk about how do we shift the industry? How do we engage truly in design build, design assist efforts? Maybe not full project design build, but how do
Sure.
we take certain strategies that can reduce labor on site, can increase safety opportunities, can be faster, right? It's going to take those kinds of efforts to help shift the industry, and I think we've got lots of customers in that space,
Right.
right? There's other customers that's like, hey, this is what I want to build over and over and over again. I don't need to change anything. I don't want to consider a dynamic or dramatic shift, and that's okay too,
Right.
right? But I'd say, it continues to be a cyclical industry,
Right.
right? Working with one colo provider this year who wants to do all dry coolers because water efficiency is really important. They're trying to build in, say, Phoenix, where water is a hot topic,
Sure.
right? Hey, that's a great solution for that market. Next year, they want to go build somewhere else, and now it's like, nope, not spending the premium for dry coolers because I don't have the PR challenges in those
Sure.
locations. And so those cyclical things happen with every one of our customers at different times.
100%.
And it's our job, frankly, to take all of those lessons learned, those options, and say, hey, let's help steer you in the right direction and path,
Yeah.
right, for that geographic location. I think, all the time, there are certain things that we should be able to standardize in our industry moving forward that will benefit all of us. And there are times where I see customers trying to standardize around something that I'm like, yeah, that's really a means and methods or a very site-specific condition.
Yeah.
Create boundaries for yourself that says this is what we want to accomplish, but it doesn't have to be dictated. And the really great, easy example is structural precast solutions versus steel and metal panel or architectural precast solution
Right.
in the built environment in the data center industry, right? Geographic location has a huge impact on that decision.
Yeah.
Steel prices have a huge impact on that decision. The amount of carbon, right? Steel versus concrete has an impact for some customers in that decision.
100%.
So instead of saying, hey, I want to build all structural precast solutions, which can be super fast and really efficient, that may not work in a part of the country where you don't have a lot of availability in the precast market,
Right.
or where steel prices have gone up. And so it's like, hey, let's not draw this perfect box and say, hey, hard and fast, this is what we're going to do no matter what, without analyzing it.
Right.
And saying, is this truly the right thing to do for that geographic location?
100%. It's probably becoming a more and more prevalent thing as we are spreading out from the NFL cities, right? Like traditionally, we've built in, if you look at a map of the United States and you look at NFL cities, I mean they look like a hub and spoke wheel, right? With all the fiber and everything coming out. And what's interesting now though is, technology and different methods and processes is getting us to a point to where, like you said, you can almost build a data center anywhere. And the problems that you have in Phoenix, Arizona, are not going to be the issues that you have in Iowa, right?
Yeah.
Like it's going to be completely different. And I have to imagine that, a company like yours, that has been around for as long as you have, and frankly has built such a large volume of the buildings that we see in the data center industry today, that clients want to come to you guys for those things. And it's because, not all these clients are in every market that you guys operate in, right?
Yeah.
But the ins and outs, and the way to get things done in those markets.
Yeah, it is. We collectively are in a situation right now where we can be a little strategic around the
Sure.
customers we work with, and we're not going to be. We will never be all things to everyone. We have no intended goal to be the biggest or most largest revenue. Like
Yep.
those things are not the things that drive us. Of course, we want to be profitable, but we want to work with people who appreciate our people,
Yeah.
that want to be collaborative. Those are the customers we're willing to bend over backwards to say, hey, let's go figure out how to do that remote job for you.
Right.
Yes, there are costs that come with it, but we also feel like we can add benefit to you, right?
Definitely.
I think about, when these questions come up, and we talk about power availability, we talk about labor availability. Simply put, the locations that have good land and power
Yeah.
don't have workforce.
No, definitely
They
not.
just don't.
They don't
And
exist
and
anymore.
so does that mean your schedule needs to be a little longer in one of those locations? Probably, because the workforce you have aren't skilled yet.
Right.
It takes training, it takes evolution. Maybe they're travelers. Maybe you start to blend travelers with locals that you can get into a workforce development program, go through some
80/20.
quality expectations, all those things. It's that 80/20.
Yep.
But it's like it takes time. The trade-off may be schedule,
Yep.
right? The trade-off may be some aspect of quality on the front end, on the first job or the first phase. But one of the things we've seen from some of the programs and how the industry has changed in scale is like these are no longer the 2 and 4 megawatt builds
No.
that we had in 2012, or the 1 megawatt builds in 2016. That slide was awesome earlier today.
When
That
you were like,
showed
yes, you know what
showed
I
the
mean?
evolution. It was like we're at a scale now where the deals are 24, 36, 40 megawatts. And if you can get a workforce somewhere and get them to stay and actually create like a retraction or retention program, you provide the craft great on-site conditions, you provide them the overtime they need or want, they may stay in that location.
Yeah.
And if you kind of work through those first phases and get into the next phase or the next pod or the next suite or the next building, like you're building on something that has the ability to get incredibly efficient. And we've seen that over and over again. And as we've grown in scale, especially in remote locations, that is a great opportunity
Right.
to grow, develop the workforce, and have some longevity factor to those locations. At the same time, that scale, I think about this as like 10, 15 years ago, if we did a subcontract with a key trade partner,
Yeah.
let's mechanical firm, electrical firm, we were talking about 20, $30 million contracts.
Right. Right.
All of a sudden, what we're talking about is 100 million,
Yeah.
200 million contracts. There's an incredible inherent risk at that scale.
100%.
And so it's a balance. You're looking for how do we create the longevity and commitment to the workforce that they've got a 3-year, 5-year, 6-year runway in that location on a job, but willing to sign a company up to a $200 million contract.
Yeah.
And those are the things our customers are constantly evaluating, right? We know many of the people we interact with are looking at the pure finances of the deal to say, how do we make this work?
Yeah.
Right? How does my pro forma work? How can I spend as little as possible upfront, achieve either the lease rate deal I need or the utilization I need, right? For enterprise customers or hyperscalers, but then also provide that longevity commitment. And that again is a different balance.
It
Right?
is. It is. And I come from a small little town, and where, like I said, nobody knows what data centers are or this, that. And like one thing that I always find super interesting that a lot of people don't realize, when we talk about labor or the size of these programs and contracts and things, and, when we're talking about these deals being 30, 40 megawatts, it it's always interesting to me because unless you're talking to someone that's, built high rises or this or that, right? Like, stadiums, things like that. You talk to people and they're like, well, how do you have a shortage of electricians in this market or mechanical contractors? And it's because, people don't realize, we're not talking about 30, 40, 50 electricians,
Right.
right? We're not, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, that on some of these larger campuses that it's not uncommon anymore to have 1,000 contractors, across your disciplines on a job site.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when you factor in many of those locations are the same locations, and it gets talked about all
That's
the time.
correct.
Manufacturing, battery manufacturing, EV, microchips, like they're all the same workforce. And you're
100%.
right. Like, let's say you take a 100 megawatt campus, or 160 megawatt campus, you're going to have every bit of 1,200 to 1,800 craft
Yep.
on that site every single day. It's a small city,
100%.
right? Sure, you still have the 9 megawatt build fit outs that maybe got 50 to 80 to 100 craft
Yeah.
workforce, right? But we see more and more of those larger jobs today than we ever did before. And I think you're right. People don't understand that scale,
Yep.
until you've set foot on a campus and looked around and went, wow,
Yep.
right? Because I've been so fortunate to work in the meta program for a while, I always find it interesting when the building is just like under roof,
Yeah.
the structure's up before a bunch of the walls go up. I love to walk to one end of the building and take a picture looking straight down to see the far end. And oftentimes, Jesse, you can't see the other end of the building.
Oh, sure. Or there's fog
Yeah,
inside the building.
and you're
Yeah.
like, wow, like how big is this location? Because what happens, people in the industry, maybe they'll go to they'll hear this podcast and they'll go to a Google Earth image, like, what are these guys really talking about? And they go look. You just can't put it in
You
perspective
can't.
when you look at it on a plan,
Yep.
on a drawing, on Google Earth, until you set foot and see the scale of these things and realize, wow, it took 2 million man hours
Yeah.
to build everything around us.
Yep.
Right.
But what's crazy is, you're squeezing those 2 million man hours into, you know, ideally, after design, after pre-con, all that, ideally into something that's less than a year,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
Squeezing that many man hours into something like that. And then you're 100% right. I mean, you can look at all the pictures you want, all the whatever, until you stand in one that's empty that just got done. And that for me, man, that's what I have always loved about being in this space too, is you know, being on the construction side of it, you get to watch this go from it's dirt. There's nothing there. And then by the time you're done, it's this awesome, massive facility that's going to help, the whole world unleash different technologies. And for me, and what I try and share with younger people coming in too is like, I get to ride around now and tell my 10-year-old son, right? Like, dad built that building. Dad
Yeah.
built that building. And like that stuff's cool,
It's an amazing experience. I've gotten to work in the sports world.
Yeah.
When I first came out of college, I worked on a bunch of sports stadiums, which was incredible. It's fun. I'm a big sports guy.
Yeah.
Family's big sports guy. Originally from Buffalo, so hardcore,
Buffalo
like
fan?
Bills and Sabres, like that's in my blood. And so I love that. That was exciting.
Yeah.
I got to work in the healthcare sector and work on hospitals, work on some amazing like life science laboratory facilities. One of the things we love at DPR and we talk about is like, hey, we're not just building a building.
Sure.
It's what happens in that building after that is actually what we're supporting and what we're responsible for. It's that
Right.
end product. And I think people do look at data centers and just think, oh, there's just big boxes using a bunch of power or water. And they don't connect the dots that those facilities are the computational spaces for the healthcare companies
Right.
that are trying to solve diseases. They're for the research and development companies trying to work on a variety of solutions, right? For the AI that is going to hopefully help solve some of our greatest challenges. And it is really cool to see because it is, as you drive, yeah, we were involved in that project.
Yep.
And it's not just a data center. some of those early data centers in Ashburn, the 80% of the world's internet traffic going through. It's like, hey, we were involved in some of those.
100%.
And that's a really cool space. And one of those things I think that can motivate people to say, well, maybe that's something I could be involved in.
Yeah.
Right. I think what comes to mind is, if I visit my family who still lives in Buffalo, almost every time we're there, my niece is like, I'm out of my data plan.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, well, and that data plan now is probably 20x what it was 2 years ago.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right. And it's those things that are changing our industry dramatically, right, over time.
No, definitely. And it's, what's cool is it's always been cool to say that, right? But really and truthfully, what is coming is, going to be exponentially more than what it has been, and the impact that it will have will be exponentially more, right? Like, I mean, just messing around with tools like, Chat GBT, which is, I mean, theoretically in its infancy, right?
Yeah.
But if you've ever messed around with that tool, I mean, you put something into it, and in a matter of seconds, it spits something out that you're like, I would have never come up with that on my own, you know what I mean? And it'll be interesting to see, how what we're doing now will impact the future generations, and how, I always think, if you look at storage sizes and the way that the footprints of these large deployments have shrunk and shrunk, and but yet the buildings are just getting bigger because the data consumption is higher. We may be able to put, more power and more storage in a smaller footprint now, but we need more footprint.
But the growth curve is exponential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like people always ask me, what it is I do. And it's hard to explain, right, what we do and get people to understand. But I tell people every day, like, I don't know. What'd you do today? Did you use your phone? Did you watch Netflix? Did you go to the grocery store? Did you go to the doctor? Right? Like,
did you order something on Amazon?
Exactly.
Right? Like,
did you take an Uber? Like, anything that we do anymore is touched by data, or somebody's collecting data on it. And I don't, it's funny because I think people are starting to realize how, that's never going to go away, right? We've already crossed that bridge. There's no going back. Yeah. And so now it's all about, how do we do it in smaller footprints? How do we deliver more capacity with less, right? And it's very difficult, as especially being in pre-con. And I'd be interested, are you seeing your clients be more and more interested in, kind of outside the box ways to get power, space, whatever it is, right?
Absolutely. I think, I'd say in the last 12 months, more and more customers saying, hey, no gens, like prices without gens. What does that look like? Customers saying, we've heard a lot today at the conference. 45 kW per rack. I've heard that probably 10 times today already.
Yeah.
And it's like, we've got people saying 150 kW per rack.
Right.
Right. And you're like, well, we haven't seen it yet.
Right.
We haven't built it yet.
Yeah.
But people are talking about it. And,
for
and
sure.
it's only a matter of time before it happens. And then now the flip side of that is like liquid cooling, right? Has been talked about for a decade.
100%.
And we're still not there. Right. But I almost think, what are the applications of AI technology in our industry moving forward? How does that help us solve some of these challenges, to come up with unique materials, unique solutions to diversify the space or maximize the density, reduce cooling demand so power isn't as great? Like, it's a little scary to me, right? But I don't feel like we're talking yet. Well, how can AI apply to our design and construction processes? The efficiencies, I think about the co-opetition word I used earlier in the Meta program, which has been an amazing experience. But what would it be like if a supplier who's shipping whatever, right, says, hey, I'm delivering to DPR Construction on this street, and right down the road, I've got an order that isn't supposed to be delivered till tomorrow, but let's combine it on the same truck.
Right.
No different than moving companies move, right? Big moving companies put 2-3 families on a truck, and they find the most efficient way to deliver those things.
Yep.
I can't tell you the last time that large scale commercial construction companies collaborated enough to say, hey, how do we lean out our supply chain,
Yeah.
reduce trucking, reduce carbon emissions, and find a more efficient way to do these things. Now, it only works if we're ordering the same materials or the same product or the same, right, 85% of materials. How does AI help us with those things?
It also only works when, it also only works when money isn't the only driving factor anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, you know, and the interesting thing is like, and why I think it's important that we're talking to subcontractors about this, or the trucking companies, or like use the trucking companies as an example, right? In order for that to happen, what you're talking about, which I think is a great idea and would be a great way to go, it's like, how do you get the trucking company to be okay with, I may not make as much money because I'm not having to do the 2 deliveries that day,
Yeah.
right? But I think that we're going to get to a point from a scale perspective that the conversation needs to shift to, hey, I promise you, you are going to make the same amount of money because we're going to be able to do more quicker,
More with less,
which is what we're going to need, right? It's what we're going to have to get to.
Yeah, efficiency across the spectrum is going to be key. And if we take things like, right, the lean construction process, if we think about lean, which in many ways, like sustainability, it's like a topic off to the side.
Yeah.
How do we integrate those conversations into our day-to-day lives, right? So everything we do has that lean concept in mind, or we're thinking about sustainability in a way, hey, that trucking company maybe makes more money because now they're not spending 2 days on fuel, shipping charges, the labor of driving the truck. Now they've got
Correct.
one delivery, right? Like, it is reframing that conversation.
It is.
And the willingness to say from all of us, it's okay to be profitable.
Right.
Yes, we want it as cheap as possible, but we also need everyone we work with to be successful. And that isn't just the owners and the developers and the general contractors. It is the trade partners.
It is.
Right? It's the supply chain. And we've got to find a way. It's like, hey, to be okay with us to say, we want them to be profitable so that they're successful, and they want to keep finding alternative solutions. As opposed to, I'm going to bid this out and drive down to the lowest possible common denominator, which we all know on the front end looks great, and on the back end causes everyone additional challenge.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, I know, as we talked about, we're here at, DCAC, and I love this because it's one of the few opportunities, one where you get to see literally everybody, right? I swear it was like a high school reunion when I walked in here the other day, seeing a lot of people. But I have a lot of experience with DPR, a lot of really good experiences, and I wanted to know, if there was one thing that, or a couple things that you really wanted everyone to know about DPR and what it is you're doing, and what your mission or purpose is, what would it be?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jesse. It is pretty interesting. We attract a lot of our workforce because of our culture, and people talk about culture all the time. I really do believe it's a differentiator for us, right? Working in a company for 20 years has been incredible. I had the fortune to work at another great construction company for 5 years before that. So I got to see those differences.
Right.
Our culture is, I think, what makes us unique in the marketplace. Are we perfect? No. I think that's one of the other elements about us that's great. Part of our core values is this idea of evolution, uniqueness, ever forward. How do we constantly evolve?
Sure.
It's the willingness to say this can be better.
Right.
And not pretend that we're perfect.
Right.
I love those things. Our mission statement feels lofty to some people. It's like, we want to be one of the most admired companies by the year 2030.
Yeah.
And people are like, what does that mean? We don't even use the word construction in it, right? And that mission statement is really powerful because it drives decisions around people. It drives decisions around the customers we want to work with. And so we're fortunate to be in this industry that's growing, has tremendous opportunities. We're excited to be here, participate with you and at this conference. It's been a great experience.
No, listen, we're super happy to have you guys. I could probably name drop 20 people right now that I've just, had great relationships with and worked with at your company. I know this is the first time you and I are getting to meet in person, and it's been an excellent experience, and we can't thank you guys enough for being part of this, and your guys' mission, that being admired and everything like that. That's super, it's noble to me because that's not a mission statement that says I'm about the bottom line, right? That's a mission statement that says I'm about, delivering good people and a good product, and that's what we need in this space, and that's what everybody's looking for. And so, man, I can't thank you enough for the time and the conversation. And if there's anything I can do, just let me know. And let's go grab a drink and enjoy some of this conference.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jesse.
Yeah, no. Hey, thanks everybody. And we'll talk to you soon.